Okay, good morning. Let's begin. I want to start today with a small reminder. So, reality check. So this is the agenda, and we are now in week 3. Okay? And today, assignment 2 will be released with a bunch of questions from this lecture. So we're moving. And at the end of this week, I want to see some topics. I've been receiving a lot of topics in email. I will need to respond to those. I have prioritized by responding to people that don't seem to be able to get in to turn it in for some reason. You should really try before you send me an email. You're clever people, you should fix technical problems and look in your email, find the passwords I sent you. But if you didn't receive anything, of course you have to let me know. Okay, so topic selection at the end of this week. But today we have innovation, which is really interesting topic. But I wanna, now that we are week left of this selecting a topic, of course, if you need more time, you should take more time. But I have some ideas. So this is the theme. You choose something you're interested in. It's, spending weeks writing about something, researching something that you hate is not a very good idea. So what I want to do is I want to come up with some ideas. Okay, so I deliberately didn't want to post this early because I want you to think, and now you have 2 weeks of thinking, and now I can share this with you. So these are just random ideas that I put down. I usually write this on the board, but it takes more time. So I'm going to go through some of these. And if you have questions, comments, if you have ideas, please share them, and we can go with this. Let's just go down the list. Lifestyle. Now, things are changing, and I will talk about generation changes also. There are because there are the generations that are now in the workplace, 20 to 30 to 40 to 35. They're different than the generations before. And that means that a lot of things change, lifestyle changes. End of wallet, textbook, CDs. What does this mean? Changes in commerce. We've been I founded my first company in 1993, and that was an e-commerce company. But nothing happened. E-commerce, it took 10 years for e-commerce to happen. Amazon was probably the only thing. Change in money, we are finally seeing this with Apple Pay and all these payment methods that people are starting to use their smartphones to pay for stuff. And there is a more stronger prediction that money, as in cash, coins, is sort of disappearing slowly. It takes time, but it is changing. And lending money, crowdfunding, the banks are worried sick about this. The banks are getting disrupted, and they're having meetings about this right now, talking about this. What are we going to do? What's the future of banking? Idea building, Kickstarter, what does this mean? Hiring. LinkedIn is, if you need to do a resume, a CV, you do it on LinkedIn. That's what I do. The university asked me for a CV, and my CV was way old because I never applied for any jobs. I just create them. So, but as a faculty member, you have to have a CV. So I filled out everything in LinkedIn and sent them the link. Here you go. This is the only thing I'm going to update. I'm not going to update some document. CVs are now in LinkedIn. And also we're seeing jobs change because, if you're good in something, programming, for example, or good in art, graphical design, music composition, whatever, you need a job. Why don't you go on these sites like Elon's, Odesk, whatever they're called, apply for a job, put in your resume. And what happens is that you take all your skill sets, and the company that is need some talent to work for them, they put all the skill sets they require. Now there's algorithms to match this. That's new. And this is why, I'm sorry to say, but university degrees are kind of getting obsolete. I'm really sorry to say this to you because that's your call. No, you're fine. It's going to be valid. But what is going to happen is that
the generation after us will.
Yeah, maybe. But my point is this. Why do we have degrees? It's a communication tool. So I apply for a job. I'm a computer scientist from University of Oregon in the US. And all I have to do is tell this. I'm a computer scientist. And they're looking for a computer scientist. Nothing more. But they're ignoring everything that I've done. All the experience, all the this. I watched a YouTube video. I took a course in iOS programming last summer. What if I could take all of these things and put them in my CV? Everything. And the CV is like 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 items of things that I've done. I read this book, boom, in the CV. And then they match it. So universities are changing. Think about this. Gamification. Can you make people do things they hate, but they look at it as a game and do it gladly? Yes, you can. Psychology. This is really interesting.
That's a book about it in another course.
Yeah. Okay. Solo Mo. That's the social, local, mobile. That was a buzzword a few years ago. What's the impact of social networks, local, mobile? This is something that we have had papers on. Social interaction. Things are changing in retail a lot. Social interaction in viewing, in TV, and social networks. Another thing is identity management. Universal identity, virtual identity, like in Square. In Square is a payment method. You walk into a shop and you take up your phone and you log in. And then when you go and order something, they can actually see a picture of you on their cash register, which is an iPad. So they have an iPad. And they will say, this is 520 something, and then they will press your face, and it will be charged to your Square account. User-generated culture content. You know, if you think about it, my company, my gaming company, we were looking at YouTube streams Saturday evening. We got together, and there was this guy that was playing our game, and there were lots of guys playing our game, and they were talking. You know, what is this? What is that? I pick up this. Deers, I have to follow them. So they're just talking while they're playing the game. They're really funny, by the way. One of them had 1.4 million views. 1.4 people are watching this guy play the damn video game. So this is a person that decided to be a YouTuber. So they just make content, make an episode a day, maybe 2 episodes, playing games. And this guy had 8 million followers. Something has changed. User-generated content. In the 20th century, it was very few people that produced stuff. Very few people. And they were broadcast by TV stations and radio stations. Gatekeepers that decided that you should watch this. Issues with the law. I'm always having emails from YouTube telling me that I was playing a song that I was not supposed to. That's why I turned down the music before the Hangout started, so I don't get these emails. Network effect. What if you can make computers for $20 and give them to people in areas like in India, where the average wage is much lower than in the West? What impact would that have? So you have access to everything. You have access to TED lectures, to university, Stanford. You have access to all of these things. What will that change?
Isn't the new Raspberry Pi 5?
Yeah, very small. You know, it's difficult to have. It's so difficult to have just, you know, power.
Smaller than a credit card.
Yes, smaller than a credit card. Raspberry Pi. Exactly. Tablet. What did that change? We see tablets all over. Professions that used to use paper, they're finally using something else. Now, a lot of things are happening in human-computer interaction, even brain communicating. But new input, touch, gesture, speech, these machines are getting so clever, like we saw with the machine intelligence, just finding out the space that they are in. It used to be that computers were really just processing machines. Now they can actually, and the only input was like keyboard and mouse, practically the same thing. But now they understand voice, and they can be aware of their space by vision. So they know where they are. Electronic paper, newspapers of the future, you can actually have displays that you can bend, fold. Web as a platform. Applications moving. This has happened. You know, flash silhouette, it's gone. Semantic web that understands things, but the API revolution really changed the web, took it to a new level where you have all these programmable things. You can talk to websites using programs. Internet infrastructures. What is really interesting here is in the old days, when my company, which was called Betware by then, it took us like 2 months to create a data center. So we would go on location, have people stay there for 2 months, getting hardware, wiring up everything, all the switches, routers. Today, you can actually do this by going into a software page and say, okay, I want a firewall here, I want this thing here, I want to have 2 computers. Now let's have 4. This is the memory. Then you press go, and it's ready. You have a data center. Something has changed. Cloud computing. Now, what does it mean for IT departments? Why do we have IT departments?
Because a surprising amount of people are not as computer literate as we would think.
I think they should just figure it out.
Yeah, but I used to work up north in a university?
I think you're right. I think you're right. There are things that need to be told. You're absolutely right. But you can move a lot of IT stuff into the cloud, but you might need a person to help you. This is the program that we use. That's not an IT problem. That's a human read problem. Anyway, in 2006, I wrote an article about cloud computing, and there was a reason for this, because I had problems getting things done due to IT department, and I said, let's get rid of this. New business model, free services, computing as a utility. This is Amazon and those guys. Will cloud save the Moore's law? Well, it already has. Future of operating system. A few years ago, it was really, the operating system was really the focus of everything. What operating is it going to be? Who is winning? Well, Microsoft, Windows, Mac OS, Linux. It was this war of the OS. Who cares today? Even the browsers don't care. You just need to go on the web, or run an app that uses the web. So this has really changed. The desktop metaphor, well, that's dead. Definitely dead.
Well, what's the desktop metaphor?
I will talk about this, but the desktop metaphor is that your operating system is organized as a desk. The first operating systems, like Windows, they were like desks. So you have file manager, and the file manager looked like a file manager where you put papers in.
Yeah, actual.
Yeah.
Documents.
Everything was, and then you had documents. It was like an office, like a desk, and you would have your filing cabinet. So they were trying to take the experience of an office and put it into a GUI, graphical user interface. That was their goal. Today, what do we use computers for? Well, we do documents, but
Browsing the internet randomly.
browsing the internet, yeah, reading, playing YouTube videos, watching YouTubers stream games. That's what we use. We use it to communicate, not to send the email. Well, maybe, if you're old as me. But all sorts of things. So the desktop metaphor, that was the sort of keyboard mouse, and now we have so much other things, gesture. We have all these apps, and we definitely don't use the desktop metaphor in smartphones. I mean, you can probably hook up a keyboard to this, but I've never seen nobody do this. Virtualization. Virtualization is the looking at computers as software. So what if you take a data center and make it a software data center? Then you can create data centers on the fly. Changes a lot. Data centers, this is for those that are into technology, but TV technology. Now, TV has always been something that is, people are waiting for the next big thing in TV. Is TV going to be next big? TV is just a screen, big screen, and there are a lot of experiments. IPTV, death of the TV station, over-the-top TV. Netflix is over the top. This is why your network bandwidth sucks in the evening, because the people in the street, they're watching Netflix, and this takes a lot of bandwidth from the pipes. 37% in the US is Netflix traffic. Now, digital government, online voting, a lot of ideas about this. Can the web improve democracy? Healthcare records? Do you want to share those things? Do you want to upload your data, everything, your health data to some private company's database? Would anybody want to do that? Why not? If they will come and tell you, hey, this is what you need to do. If you don't do this, you will be dead in 10 years.
There's a lot of regulation issues there and personal.
Yes, there's a lot of regulations. And that's one of the problems that people need to solve. Can you do this? There are people that have in their cars a tracking device that will track their driving style, whether they speed, how they drive. Now they take this data and send it to the insurance company. Now, why would they do that? Well, they get lower premium. So, and also it makes them drive better, less risk of accidents. They know they're being tracked, so they behave responsibly. Everybody wins. So the idea with this preposterous actually can make sense for people if you allow this. I mean, privacy is gone. Privacy is dead anyway. Gaming, a lot of gaming stuff. Casual games, multiplayer games, games and society, meaning that one, for example, games drive technology a lot. One of the enabling, the last question in assignment 1, the correct answer is computer games. So the question was, what are the enabling technologies for making machine intelligence happen? Computer games. If anybody answered this, I would be happy, but I doubt it.
No.
Because computer games need graphical processing units, and they drive development of graphical processing units, among other things. Really fast floating point calculating machines. Okay? Now, having all these powerful processors, you take 16,000 of them, and you can teach a software to recognize cats. That was the story that we. So the enabling technology for machine intelligence is, of course, these graphical processing units, the power that we have, the big data that we have, and all of these things. Gaming drives technology a lot. Virtual reality, that's of course huge. Convergence of things, not sure if the new business models, that's very interesting. So, like, I mean, how much do you pay to use Gmail? Nothing. Well, don't they make any money? Yeah, they make billions. Another example, Flickr. That was a very good example. You can put your photos there, free. It's a community of people that take pictures. And you can see other people's pictures. You can share your picture with anybody. You can upload everything. You don't pay anything, but still they make money. How do they make money?
Advertisement, and you don't actually own the pictures. You put them.
And another thing is you can upgrade to a pro account. And the pro account costs money. Now it turns out that the cost per user is so low that the 1% that actually pays will pay for everybody and they still make profit. Now we have scale that is so huge. Business model change, and those that figured this out, they created the service. And also moving from the economies of scarcity to abundance. Because if you think about it, in the past, we had these plastic discs for distributing music. So if you wanted music, you went and bought plastic discs.
They're still around.
Yes, they're still around, and you can buy them, and you can also buy LPs. But it's not the mainstream way of music.
At least in Japan.
It's not, well, you might find exceptions to this, but it's not mainstream. Now, there's one problem with this method, and that is there are only limited number of stores. There are only limited number of shelves in the stores. So it's very likely that most of the stores will have the same music because people prefer this. They will not have some obscure music coming out of some country by an unknown artist that you know, and only you, and you would buy it, nobody else would buy it. They can't carry that. So you have to have rock stars and pop stars and all of these stars, so everybody will buy them because that's the only thing available. Now, if you take this model away, put it on the internet, you have abundance. And suddenly you can actually find songs on Spotify that nobody wants to buy except you, very few people. It's available. And that's the economy of abundance. Content distribution of the future, Web3 technology. I'm not sure if Web3 is a concept. There was a Web2, Web3, that was sort of the HTML5 thing. The app internet, that's very interesting. Future of search, payments. I think there's a theory that I have. You have different steps of data complexity. Search is one thing to manage data complexity. But when search becomes useless, you need something intelligent. So instead of you going to Google and searching, the next step after this is Google coming to you and saying, hey, here's the thing that you're going to search for, that you were about to search for. Because we know this. We know what you're doing. And this is the scary part. But people can do this very cleverly. So if you book a trip somewhere, the ads that pop up, they will be about the other place and your interests. So if you like to go to pop concerts, the ads will be pop concerts on these dates in this country where you will be. Predictive intelligence, trying to outsmart you. And people will freak out until they find this very convenient. And then they will freak out because a service doesn't do this. So you walk into the store and the guy comes, hey, here's the shirt that you want in your favorite color. Now what are you going to do? You'll probably punch him. I mean,
I think it'll fine.
but why did he know? Then in a few years after this, if you walk into the store and the guy is clueless, doesn't know who you are, nothing, then you will punch him in the face because he's not providing service. So things get creepy first, and then they get normal. Okay, payments, we got that. Technology and education. You know, virtual teachers. Why do I have to stand here? Why not a hologram of an artificial intelligence that just real time? Maybe that's the future. Maybe I have a few years left in this. I think education in general is really, really outdated. And one of the problems that, you know, I would like to teach as a game. It would be a game. And you would not be allowed to continue. You can start at any time, and you can take whatever pace, and you will get bonus points, that's the assignments, and you will level up. You can't go to the next level until you have finished this level. All the game concepts, put them in a course. And the only thing stopping this is we don't have the tools. It's difficult. We don't scale. And I also think that the education method of last century was about facts and speed. For example, if you look at compulsory school, grundskole, what the home assignments that 10 years old, 12 years old have is about speed. So you have to multiply 2 3-digit numbers, and there are like 100 pages of this. Why is that? Because you're getting up to speed. Do you need this today? Do you need to memorize everything? You go to law school for 5 years just reading when you can just do search? So you have to know basic, how things work, and then you search the rest. Yeah. Maybe that will be the thing, but we're still teaching the kids speed and cramming facts into their head instead of putting general knowledge, and then you can figure out the facts. Because all you have to do is if you need to calculate 2 numbers, it's here. And we're dependent on technology anyway. So, okay, digital technology as time change. Time change. Delay and shifting time. For example, if you have a favorite show on TV, if you still have that, you're not gonna go through red light to get home exactly on this time to watch it. You can just watch this anytime. Time shifting, place shifting, data. We hear a lot about big data, data visualization, math, war of the futures. I'm just randomly picking this out, just taking this topic as we go down the list. Robots, unmanned aerial vehicle. I don't like that. That's been very popular in the past. Can you fight a war 5,000 miles away using video screen and gaming joystick? That's what they do in the US Army. So you go to some bunker in New Mexico or something, and you start at 8 o'clock or something, and you take this joystick and you take your drone and kill some people, and then after your shift is done, you go home and have dinner with the kids and wife. That's what they're doing. And they still suffer the same physical or psychological syndromes that if they were in the field. This is why the Americans don't need to send troops. They just have them somewhere in the desert and control these things. So a lot of technology in war. Domestic help, this is huge. This is now. We have seen a lot of robots emerge actually into homes right now. One of them is, for example, there are a couple of things you can buy. One from Amazon, small devices that you put on the table and listens to everything. And you can ask it a question. I will show it to you later. Also, cultures like Japan, they are very robotically minded. They like robots. It's in their culture. One problem that they have is that they are getting older. Generations are getting older, so they don't have people to take care of all the old people. And this is why they're introducing robots. Robots that can help people stand up. Just devices. Think about the vacuum cleaner, a little bit taller, and you can actually sit on the robot, and the robot will take you. Robots that can go get you a glass of water. They can actually do this. They can do stuff. But robots today, they're actually very primitive. They are, but they are getting better fast. And I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about these advances in robots. And now the guy that was interviewing, doing the host, he was kind of saying, "Oh, this is scary, man. They're going to take over the world. They're going to kill us all." And then the other guy, "Oh, well, it's not there yet. Relax." I mean, it's very difficult to have robots just open the doors. That's difficult for them. So just close the door and you're safe. That was the answer. But it's getting there. When they can open the door, you should be scared. And wireless opening, ding. Local, WhatsApp to Foursquare. This is sort of the, I'm here. I need a restaurant. Ping, show me. And this already exists. Health issues. Sensors. Your phone monitors your health. There are a lot of solutions where you just, if you have a rash or the kids has a rash, you just take a picture, send it, and they will tell you what it is. Also monitoring smart toilets. It will do medical checkup on your stuff and tell you, wow, you need to drink less or whatever. Or you have a disease here. And also we talked about this future transportation, self-driving vehicles. Uber is on the road to, their mission is to have a bunch of Uber vehicles driverless. And that brings us to how do you organize cities, electronic cars, navigation, stuff like this. Depth of relational databases, now we're getting technical again. No SQL, this, that movement. There's a lot of things changing in computer science. Battery technology. Now, I've been waiting for batteries that will last 10 years. You never have to charge your phone. 2 years is okay because people switch their phone every 2 years anyway. Also batteries that are bigger than this. Batteries that are like 3 football fields. The problem with, for example, electricity is that the supply and demand is real time. So the electricity that is powering the lights in this room, it was created a few seconds ago somewhere and boom, transported here. That's the problem with renewable energy, like wind, solar, because the sun goes down and the wind is not blowing.
We need fusion.
Yeah, fusion, that's coming probably. People have been talking about that for many years. But what if we could take all these renewable stuff and put it into a battery? Because the cheapest way to store energy today is water. You have a lake up in the mountain, you keep the energy there. And you make a dam somewhere on the way down. And when you need energy, you just take water from the lake. That's the cheapest way to store energy today. What if you can have this huge battery? You can even have ships that are huge batteries and charge them and go then and put a city to plug in a city or something. Will last for a week or I don't know. But try to escape the things that you already know. Think outside this. Cybercrime, that's the story of 2015. All these people hacking. It's a big business today. Free speech. What about uprising in Egypt, Iran? When the uprising was in Tehran, I watched the feed from Twitter. CNN didn't have anything. The news outlets didn't have anything, but Twitter had everything. And you could see the pictures of people getting shot and stuff like this. And even when the Twitter had the maintenance scheduled, so they were taking the service down. And this was in the middle of the uprising in Tehran in 2010, I think. And they had planned this long in advance. So it was a weekend, Sunday, they were going to take the site down for a few hours and then come up again. They had scalability problems. You really needed to do this. And then they got a phone call from the White House saying, no, you're not going down. This is the only intelligence we have. Twitter. People taking pictures, tweeting in Tehran. Normal people in the streets. So technology is really changing. And companies like Google, they've been giving away free stuff just to allow people to do this. Machine intelligence, now we're into interesting stuff. This is what I added this morning. What tasks can it do? Impact on the job market. A lot of interesting stuff in this. So I will share this list. I will clean it up a little bit, throw out some outdated stuff. And then you can look at this. Okay, any questions? Are we good? Where's the mouse? Okay, let's talk about innovation. So this is lecture 5. Innovation. Like this guy said, I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Now, Edison is an interesting character, and I will talk about him. But let's first review what we were talking about last time. The adjacent possible. I mean, that's a terminology that I really want you to understand because it's so useful. It's going to explain a lot of things as we move on in this course. You take the components in the environment, and this will explain why innovation happens when it does. Why does intelligent machines work in 2012? It's because we have huge computing power. We can use 16,000 machines easily because they exist already, and we have lots and lots of data. YouTube has more cat videos than anything. So you put them there in, train. Now in the 80s, we didn't have this. They didn't have the computing power, and they didn't have the data. And the computing power comes because of the graphical processing unit, computer games. Combinatory process, taking things, stitching them together, and making something else. And this is how evolution and technology have worked over generations. And Gauss law, it means that if you have a complex system that works, it means it does so because there are other simpler systems that also works. And the disappearing law of disappearing technology just sort of disappears, goes away, becomes something that is not technology, something else. And for example, this one here, internet will disappear. This is from last year. I've been saying this for many years. It's in the nature of these technologies. It will, of course, disappear in a way you don't think about it anymore. It will be there. And outdated things that should go away but do not. And they never do. I mean, you mentioned CDs. People are still using that stuff. We talked about complexity of technology. This is the local and linear thing, for generations, generation after generation after generation, everything would be the same. Everything would be the same. You would learn what your parents did, you would do it, and you teach it to your kids, and you would die. Global and exponential. Something happened in the last 200 whatever years, and we're going up there. And it's also population explosion. If you take the population in the world, it's the same graph, exponential. Now, if you do this, you might wonder, what about if you have like few million people in the world, millions of years ago, and now we have 7 billion? How can the world work? What's the GDP on this? On average, what's the gross domestic product for average person? It turns out that the GDP, which is a measurement of productivity in societies, how much they produce, gross domestic product, has gone exponentially also. And this brings me to the sex video that I'm going to show you. You get everything in this class. Now it's a guy called Matt Ridley.
I didn't talk about it.
Yeah, he came to Iceland. He's I don't want to go into political stuff, but not everybody agree with him. But he wrote a book a few years ago called The Rational Optimist. And what he's saying is that maybe, despite all the news that things are going to hell, maybe we are doing pretty well. So I'm going to show you this, his lecture, TED lecture, When Ideas Have Sex, and it explains the evolution and how technology innovation happens.
When I was a student here in Oxford in the 1970s, the future of the world was bleak. The population explosion was unstoppable, global famine was inevitable, a cancer epidemic caused by chemicals in the environment was going to shorten our lives, the acid rain was falling on the forests, the desert was advancing by a mile or two a year, the oil was running out, and a nuclear winter would finish us off. None of those things happened. And astonishingly, if you look at what actually happened, in my lifetime, the average per capita income of the average person on the planet, in real terms, adjusted for inflation, has trebled. Lifespan is up by 30% in my lifetime. Child mortality is down by 2/3. Per capita food production is up by 1/3. And all this at a time when the population has doubled. How did we achieve that? Whether you think it's a good thing or not, how did we achieve that? How did we become the only species that becomes more prosperous as it becomes more populous? The size of the blob in this graph represents the size of the population, and the level of the graph represents GDP per capita. I think to answer that question, you need to understand how human beings bring together their brains and enable their ideas to combine and recombine, to meet and indeed to mate. In other words, you need to understand how ideas have sex. I want you to imagine how we got from making objects like this to making objects like this. These are both real objects. One is an Australian hand axe from 500,000 years ago of the kind made by Homo erectus. The other is obviously a computer mouse. They're both exactly the same size and shape to an uncanny degree. I've tried to work out which is bigger, and they're not. It's almost impossible. And that's because they're both designed to fit the human hand. They're both technologies. In the end, their similarity is not that interesting. It just tells you they were both designed to fit the human hand. The differences are what interest me, because the one on the left was made to a pretty unvarying design for about 1 million years, from 1.5 million years ago to 500,000 years ago. Homo erectus made the same tool for 30,000 generations. Of course, there were a few changes, but tools changed slower than skeletons in those days. There was no progress, no innovation. It's an extraordinary phenomenon, but it's true, whereas the object on the right is obsolete after 5 years. And there's another difference too, which is the object on the left is made from one substance. The object on the right is made from a confection of different substances, from silicon and metal and plastic and so on. And more than that, it's a confection of different ideas. The idea of plastic, the idea of a laser, the idea of transistors. They've all been combined together in this technology. And it's this combination, this cumulative technology that intrigues me, because I think it's the secret to understanding what's happening in the world. My body's an accumulation of ideas too. The idea of skin cells, the idea of brain cells, the idea of liver cells, they've come together. How does evolution do cumulative combinatorial things? Well, it uses sexual reproduction. In an asexual species, if you get two different mutations in different creatures, a green one and a red one, then one has to be better than the other, one goes extinct for the other to survive. But if you have a sexual species, then it's possible for an individual to inherit both mutations from different lineages. So what sex does is it enables the individual to draw upon the genetic innovations of the whole species. It's not confined to its own lineage. What's the process that's having the same effect in cultural evolution as sex is having in biological evolution? And I think the answer is exchange. The habit of exchanging one thing for another. It's a unique human feature. No other animal does it. You can teach them in the laboratory to do a little bit of exchange, and indeed there's reciprocity in other animals, but the exchange of one object for another never happens. As Adam Smith said, no man ever saw a dog make a fair exchange of a bone with another dog. You can have culture without exchange. You can have, as it were, asexual culture. Chimpanzees, killer whales, these kind of creatures, they have culture. They teach each other traditions, which are handed down from parent to offspring. In this case, chimpanzees teaching each other how to crack nuts with rocks. But the difference is that these cultures never expand, never grow, never accumulate, never become combinatorial. And the reason is because there is no sex, as it were. There is no exchange of ideas. Chimpanzee troops have different cultures in different troops. There's no exchange of ideas between them. And why does exchange raise living standards? Well, the answer came from David Ricardo in 1817. And here's a Stone Age version of his story, although he told it in terms of trade between countries. Adam takes 4 hours to make a spear and 3 hours to make an axe. Oz takes 1 hour to make a spear and 2 hours to make an axe. So Oz is better at both spears and axes than Adam. He doesn't need Adam. He can make his own spears and axes. Well, no, because if you think about it, if Oz makes 2 spears and Adam makes 2 axes, and then they trade, then they will each have saved an hour of work. And the more they do this, the more true it's going to be. Because the more they do this, the better Adam is going to get at making axes, and the better Oz is going to get at making spears. So the gains from trade are only going to grow. And this is one of the beauties of exchange, is it actually creates the momentum for more specialization, which creates the momentum for more exchange, and so on. Adam and Oz both saved an hour of time. That is prosperity, the saving of time in satisfying your needs.
Okay, break.
More like topic that you showed where the ideas for the subject. Yeah, where can we learn some of this in your
Okay, let's continue. And now you can stop using your computers. You can stop playing video games or being on Facebook. Okay, so his point was this. If you do exchange, if you specialize and do exchange, and everybody specializes, becomes better and better, and they optimize their work, it creates prosperity. Now, he used another measurement, and that was how many hours do you need to work to get 1 hour of light? And if you go back 1800, 1700, when they had these wax candles, or these candles that they had, it took a lot of hours to get light, but now it takes seconds. And that's one way to measure the progress and prosperity that the human world has. So the question is, how does this innovation happen? Now, let's ask ourselves, who invented the telephone? We talked about this before. Answer is easy. Okay, phonograph? Edison? Combustion engine? Probably some guy that has a name that is a car now. Bench. Photographic film? Eastman? Became Eastman Kodak. Kodak became a case study for us. Alternate current motor, AC, of course. Safety razor, of course. These are sort of the famous ones. And the thing is this, we associate discovery of new things with a person. So it's become who invented. We can have longer lists like this. Today is probably not as clean as this. So all of this is the brilliant scientist working in his lab. And here's an example, Nikola Tesla. He is the perfect example of a brilliant scientist, brilliant man working in his lab. He came out with tons and tons of invention. And Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison are actually really interesting figures to explore and study how they work. He worked alone, very eccentric man, always stayed in hotels, got wealthy selling his inventions, but he didn't probably manage his business very well. He was not in this for the financial gain. I have a short video here about Nikola Tesla.
It was Nikola Tesla who captured the power of Niagara Falls with his alternating current system and made it possible to transmit electricity to all of America and the world. It was Tesla who patented the technology for wireless communications that is used in all radio and television broadcasting. His incredible legacy can be seen in everything from remote control to neon and fluorescent lighting, X-rays, guided missiles, and even the Strategic Defense Initiative. Yet somehow history has overlooked this remarkable man.
Tesla was indeed a genius in the first magnitude. He was a technological visionary, and he could envision great things and make them work.
He was a foreigner, an immigrant who arrived in America with only his dreams. A proud and sometimes arrogant man, he worked and locked horns with some of the most powerful people of his day. Thomas Edison, who resented his ideas. Guglielmo Marconi, who capitalized on his inventions. George Westinghouse, who created the Westinghouse Electric Company with Tesla's patents. And the great financier, J. Pierpont Morgan, who supported and then abandoned. At the height of his career, Tesla was one of the most famous men in the world. His inventions helped America grow into a powerful industrial nation. His ideas created billion-dollar corporations. But Tesla was not a practical man. Always driven toward the next great breakthrough, he failed to protect his commercial interests. In the end, others made fortunes with his inventions, and he wound up penniless and rejected.
Money does not mean to me what it does to others. All my money has been invested in inventions to make man's life a little easier.
So visionary. This is one way you make innovation, and that is a brilliant scientist working alone and coming up with ideas. Another guy, this one used a totally different approach. Instead of having a vision like Tesla and trying to figure out how it would work, this guy had a factory, idea factory, where he would crank out new ideas every, other month or something. And he truly used brute force methods to find out what works. So they're different in this way. One would just think, do the math, and the other one would just try things out and see what works. Short video on this guy also.
And he invented the universal stock ticker, his first major invention. Western Union paid him $40,000 for it. He took the money and invested in a dream. All during the hobo years, he had dreamed of building a laboratory. And finally, in 1876, he settled in the little town of Menlo Park, New Jersey. To his home there, he took his young bride, Mary Stillwell Edison. Close by the house, the main laboratory building was connected to the outside world by telegraph wire. The chemistry lab was the little candy butcher's dream come true. He filled his lab with the best technicians and the best machines money could buy. He was the first man to conceive of an invention factory, a hive of specialists on a belt line. At the top of the line was the old man, as they called him even then, supplying the ideas and the inspiration. He announced to the world,
I produce a minor invention every month, and a major one every 6 months.
It was no idle boast, and the invention started pouring out of Menlo Park.
So he had a factory just cranking out new invention. And companies today are doing this. They take more than 1 or 2 months. I mean, Apple has a cycle of new phone upgrade every 2 years, and then new version and this is how they sustain themselves and sell us new version of the same stuff we don't need. So remember this, innovation is the change in technology. That's the definition of innovation, change in technology in some way, something newly introduced. This is the proper definition in the dictionary. But it's about taking things and stitching them together. This saves 30% of transportation oil costs, just to have this giant sail. There are 2 types, or actually 3 types of innovation. You can have either So it's either sustaining innovation, meaning that innovation just moves on gradually. It can't be evolutionary and it can't be revolutionary, but they're sustaining. They just move on in a very predictable way. And then disruptive, and I'm going to talk about disruptive in a lecture later, and all the what does that mean. And so it's kind of a buzzword, overused buzzword, but I've been using it for many, many years. Sustaining technology, this is the predictable thing. This is the gradual improvement on products that you take for granted. I mean, TVs are always getting better. They're getting sharper, more features, and every year you see more. Cars, every year you see better cars, more safe, new features, but they're basically the same. They're not going to change anything. They're just new models, new style, and it becomes commoditized. Commodity is something that you just, like potatoes, sugar, and stuff like this. It's just things that you use. They will not change anything in people's life because they're just commodities. Red ocean means that there's bloody competition in this. Everybody's competing on price, doing the same thing. I mean, if your favorite car is not available, you'll just buy another car. If your favorite toothpaste is not available, you'll just buy another one. It's a bloody competition, and there's no difference between the products anymore. Well, there is, and that's fashion, colors, stuff like this. And then it's revolution. There's an innovation that creates a new market by allowing customers to solve a problem in a new way, but it doesn't change anything much. For example, when the car came, it was not disruptive. It didn't change very much. Few people, very wealthy people, they could get this as a hobby thing. Then years later, it would become disruptive. And it was not disruptive because it was so expensive. First computers were really, really expensive. Only governments could use them. It didn't change people's lives very much. And then you have disruptive technology. Now, the car became disruptive when Henry Ford created the assembly line. And with the assembly line, he could lower the cost. So the average person, by saving for a few years, they could actually buy a car. And that changed very much. That was disruptive. PC, very disruptive. It killed lots of companies. All of these inventions, they have impact. They can either be coming from the bottom or they can be new market. Coming from the bottom is interesting. That's for example, what Toyota did in America. American car company were creating these huge, expensive cars. And then Toyota comes with the Corolla, a tiny, small, cheap vehicle. And the car manufacturer, they just laughed. Americans don't want this. Well, they did. So they took the cheapest version, and the traditional car companies, they would say, well, we don't need to make cheap cars. People will buy our high-end. And then Toyota came with a higher car, a better car, more expensive car, and then more expensive, and then more expensive. They came in from the bottom. Same with the computers. Low quality, nobody wants it, but then next year they did want it. Disruptive technology, we have a whole lecture on this. But how does technology really happen? Because it does. Because most inventions don't happen by brilliant scientists sitting alone in their lab coming up with ideas. It doesn't happen that way. I mean, we have great examples, but it really doesn't happen that way. We take the ideas we inherit and stumble across, we jiggle them together and shape them together as a new one. And how do you do this? Well, it's through exchange of mankind enjoyed the rise to living something. So these concepts bring me to the coffee house. Now, what's so special about coffee house?
History, I remember from history class. It's basically where most of, a lot of European intellectuals were meeting at the time in the 17th, 18th centuries and discussing things, discussing ideas and what should be done about things.
They were forbidden at the time because the government feared that
people would organize.
Yeah.
Okay, point that it was forbidden. Yes, you're right. It's a space where people meet and talk. and share ideas. And there are many places like ports where people would come together, like cities of port cities, and they would share their ideas. And somebody would say, oh, we're trying these things here. Oh, you are, but we did this. Oh, yeah. And then there will be a spillover. This is how things happen. And I have a video here. I'm going to show you a lot of videos now. This is a great book by Stephen Johnson. And he did a talk on TED about this book. And he has some really, really interesting, it's a really good book of innovation. I'm going to show you the first part of this video.
Just a few minutes ago, I took this picture about 10 blocks from here. This is the Grand Cafe here in Oxford. I took this picture because this turns out to be the first coffee house to open in England in 1650. That's its great claim to fame. And I wanted to show it to you not because I want to give you a kind of Starbucks tour of historic England, but rather because the English coffee house was crucial to the development and spread of one of the great intellectual flowerings of the last 500 years, what we now call the Enlightenment. And the coffee house played such a big role in the birth of the Enlightenment, in part because of what people were drinking there, right? Because before the spread of coffee and tea through British culture, what people drank, both elite and mass folks drank day in and day out from dawn until dusk, was alcohol, right? Alcohol was the daytime beverage of choice. You would drink a little beer with breakfast and have a little wine at lunch, a little gin, particularly around 1650, and top it off with a little beer and wine at the end of the day. That was the healthy choice, right? Because the water wasn't safe to drink. And so effectively, until the rise of the coffee house, you had an entire population that was effectively drunk all day. And you can imagine what that would be like, right, in your own life, and I know this is true of some of you, if you were drinking all day and then you switched from a depressant to a stimulant in your life, you would have better ideas. You would be sharper and more alert. And so it's not an accident that a great flowering of innovation happened as England switched to tea and coffee.
There's also another book that came out, which was called The Medici Effect. Think about this city, Florence, in the, what was it, 15th century or something, I can't recall, where the Medicis were ruling the city. They would bring all kinds of artists, builders, architects together into the city, and something flourished there in this city because of bringing all these different people together. And a few years ago, there was a book called Medici Effect, which was exactly explaining these things. So where the people meet, there you have the ideas. And let's continue with Steve Johnson.
But the other thing that makes the coffee house important is the architecture of the space. It was a space where people would get together from different backgrounds, different fields of expertise, and share. It was a space, as Matt Ridley talked about, where ideas could have sex, right? This was their conjugal bed, in a sense. Ideas would get together there. And an astonishing number of innovations from this period have a coffee house somewhere in their story.
So the coffee house, the importance is the space. Okay, environmental state, where people meet, where the ideas have sex. And this is a quote from Steve Jobs. But innovation comes from people meeting up in the hallways or calling each other at 10:30 at night with new ideas, or because they realize something that shoots holes in what we've been thinking about the problem. So people talking together. And if you think about it, if you've seen pictures from workplaces like Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, and all these tech startups, I mean, you can go on Business Insider and see and search for business tours, office tours, and they will show all these locations. Now, the office is probably going to be open, bright colors, multiple colors. It's going to have few spaces where you can be isolated, like take a phone call or something like this, but they're open. And the cafeterias are always very much open. And even when Steve Jobs was designing Pixar, he owned Pixar, the animation studio, and when he designed the new location for them, he insisted that the toilets, there would be only one toilet or one bunch of toilets and in one place, and it would be in the middle of the building. So people would have to come, and there were spaces around where you can actually talk. So when you needed to go to the toilet, you would meet somebody. That was the idea.
We take ideas from other people, from people we've learned from, people we run into in the coffee shop, and we stitch them together into new forms and we create something new. That's really where innovation happens. And that means that we have to change some of our models of kind of what innovation and deep thinking really looks like, right? I mean, this is one vision of it. Another is Newton and the apple. This is a statue that Newton was in Cambridge. This is a statue from Oxford. You know, you're sitting there thinking a deep thought and the apple falls from the tree and you have a theory of gravity. In fact, the spaces that have historically led to innovation tend to look like this, right? This is Hogarth's famous painting of a kind of political dinner at a tavern, but this is what the coffee shop looked like back then. This is the kind of chaotic environment where ideas were likely to come together, where people are likely to have kind of new, interesting, unpredictable collisions, people from different backgrounds. So if we're trying to build organizations that are more innovative, we have to build spaces that, strangely enough, look a little bit more like this. This is what your office should look like. It's part of my message here. And one of the problems with this is that people are actually, when you research this field, people are notoriously unreliable when they actually kind of self-report on where they have their own good ideas or their history of their best ideas. And a few years ago, a wonderful researcher named Kevin Dunbar decided to go around and basically do the Big Brother approach to figuring out where good ideas come from. He went to a bunch of science labs around the world and videotaped everyone as they were doing every little bit of their job. So when they were sitting in front of the microscope, when they were talking to their colleagues at the water cooler and all these things. And he recorded all these conversations and tried to figure out where the most important ideas, where they happened. And when we think about the, the classic image of the scientist in the lab, we have this image, they're poring over the microscope and they see something, in the tissue sample and, oh, eureka, they've got the idea. What happened actually when Dunbar kind of looked at the tape is that in fact, almost all the important breakthrough ideas did not happen alone in the lab in front of the microscope. They happened at the conference table at the weekly lab meeting when everybody got together and shared their kind of latest data and findings. Oftentimes, when people shared the mistakes they were having, the error, the noise, and the signal they were discovering. And something about that environment, and I've started calling it the liquid network, where you have lots of different ideas that are together, different backgrounds, different interests, jostling with each other, bouncing off each other. That environment is, in fact, the environment that leads to innovation.
The liquid network, that's the term that I want you to remember. One of the definitions in this class. The liquid network. A good idea is a network. Innovation happens with collaboration. When ideas are shared. Now, working in the gaming industry, I meet a lot of gamers, indie developers that have a great idea for a game. And then I ask them, what's the idea? I can't tell you. Why not? You would steal it. Well, I have my own ideas, and they're probably better than yours anyway. But there was a competition once, the first competition that the Icelandic Gaming Society held. And there was one guy that had this attitude. And he said, no, I'm not going to share this. You're going to steal it. And he submitted, strangely enough, an application for the contest, best game. There was another group that came to meetups, where game developers would meet in bars in the evening. And they showed their idea. And they asked, hey, anybody here that wants to help us? We need artists. Do you want to help? We want to make a game. This is the idea. And they got a lot of people helping them out. And they made a great game and they won. The other guy, he had a horrible idea. And if he'd showed this to me, I would have told him, no, you need to do it this way. But he didn't. So sharing ideas is not as dangerous as it might seem. Maybe it's a good idea to share, but you have to be careful. Maybe you should use patents and things like this. Now, this brings me to cities. There is a reason for cities. As you can see, when people get together, and this is continuing, because cities are growing and growing, and there are more people in the world today. I think this crossover point happened a few years ago, maybe last year or some years ago, where more people actually lived in cities than in urban areas. And the cities are growing really, really, really fast. And this is just escalating. Now, another thing that happens also with ideas is what is called the hummingbird effect. Now, this is a very strange animal. This is a unique bird. It can stay in just absolutely still It's like a drone that is stabilizing itself. Now, what happened? Why does this bird even exist? Well, he does exist because of co-evolution of insects and plants. Now, plants, when they were, according to Darwin's theory of evolution, survival of the fittest, flowers, to be able to pollinate and continue with the next generation of flowers, you needed insects. And to make the flower attractive, their nectars and what they have attractive, they would be in multiple colors with a lot of smell. So the insects would come, and the insects would take the seeds, and they would take them on with them, and the next generation of flowers would be born. For the insects, this was some way of food source. This was a food source for the insects. So they co-developed. Now, having all these flowers, this strange bird sort of becomes how it is. It evolves into what it is because there were flowers. So this is an example of a spillover thing. So you have something here like flowers, which were because of insects. Suddenly a bird starts to evolve into something that can use these flowers. And this is what is called the hummingbird effect. Now, there are many examples of this unexpected consequence of new invention. For example, do you know when glasses first appeared? You know, glasses that you wear?
Reading spectacles were in the Middle Ages, like you held in front of you. They existed back then.
Oh, yeah.
And they were used by monks, I believe.
Why monks?
Because monks did a lot of reading.
Yes. Spectacles became popular after the printing press. People didn't know it. They were farsighted, nearsighted. They had bad vision, but nobody cared because they were never reading. Some may have. But what happened after the printing press? Glasses as a consumer product had to be invented. Spectacles. Unexpected consequence of new invention. Now, I have another video from Steve Johnson, the guy that was talking about the coffee house. He wrote another book, and the book is called How We Got to Now. It's a really interesting book, and he takes like 6 subjects: cold, light, glass, materials or things that change the way the world is. And many of these are not that old. And here he's talking about one of these things.
But in the book, it's what I call the hummingbird effect, which is unexpected consequences of new innovations as they kind of ripple through society. So someone invents something to solve a specific purpose, and they're focused on that specific purpose. But once that invention or that idea gets into circulation in society, it ends up triggering a series of largely unpredictable effects, most of which were entirely not envisioned by the inventor, him or herself, in the first place. And that really is a key part of the story of the last 500 or 1,000 years of human history. It's not just new machines and new tools and new scientific ideas, but the strange way in which they triggered these hummingbird effects throughout society. And one of my favorite examples from the cold episode, all about technologies of refrigeration and air conditioning and so on, is about the story of air conditioning. So air conditioning is invented at the beginning of the 1900s by Willis Carrier, who goes on to found the Carrier Corporation, who's a young engineer who's hired by a Brooklyn printing house that's been having trouble with printing these color magazines in the summer months because the humidity is so intense. The ink is kind of smearing on the page. And so they hire this young engineer to design what is effectively a giant dehumidifier. And he builds this contraption, and it has this interesting effect. It does take the moisture out of the air, but it also makes the air a little cooler. And it stops the ink from blurring on the page. But he also notices that everybody wants to have lunch in the room with that machine. It's suddenly like, wow, it's really nice in here. And so he begins to think that actually there might be more of a just kind of making the air nice kind of consumer application of this, not just as a functional industrial technology to help with printing and other things that require less humidity or lower temperatures. And so he sets off and he builds a company around air conditioning. But the real change, the big kind of hummingbird effect, comes after around 1950, when the first home air conditioning units basically go on sale, where the technology is condensed down to fit in a window, and then they're kind of home central air systems that start to be marketed. And all of a sudden, the introduction of this technology triggers the largest migration of human beings in the history of the United States. When all of these people moved to the South, moved to the desert states, and moved to Florida, moved to Texas, moved to Southern California, to places where, up until that point, particularly the kind of the Deep South and you know, places like Vegas and Phoenix, basically it was borderline uninhabitable, particularly in the summer in those places with 110 degrees. At the turn of the century, there were 107 people living in Las Vegas. And right after the introduction of air conditioning, you see this huge swing of populations to the south from the north. And that ends up triggering a massive swing in the Electoral College. So there's a 60-vote swing from the north to the south, because, almost entirely because of air conditioning. And that Sun Belt coalition ends up being crucial to Ronald Reagan's successful bid for the presidency in 1980.
So air conditioning got Ronald Reagan elected. Think about this. Hummingbird effect. And also, other example, printed press, spectacles, smartphones. Any guesses? Drone revolution. Why did the drone revolution take off right after the invention of smartphones? Because we could have all these components. You know, the gyro stuff and, you know, sensors. And do-it-yourself drones, filming and harvesting, all sorts of research. You have drones, and in the last few years, we've seen pictures in nature, pictures of waterfalls that were impossible to take just a few years before. You would need a helicopter, but who can afford helicopters? So they would, you know, I mean, you see these interesting photos. Also harvesting, you can have a drone take pictures of your field if you're a farmer, and it can actually sense where it needs nutrition. So you can have then robots going to the field and with nutrition where it's actually needed. iPad. Any guesses? What user group?
Gamers?
Gamers. What age would you guess? 2 years old. I mean, 2 years old, they can work a mouse, but it's not easy for them. But an iPad, I mean, a lot of game companies went straight into this space. Games for 2 to 5 years old. Okay, you know what this is? Newton. This is Newton.
The other problem that people have is they like to condense their stories of innovation down.
Before we go, you know, remember the story of the apple that fell and he got the idea of gravity there? Yeah. Yeah, but that's the story, you know, that gets, if you look back, you sort of, this happened. That's where I got the idea, sort of glorifying the moment, the eureka moment that I got the idea. But actually it happened in a much different way. It happened by a slow hunch over a long period of time. And then at some point in time you realize, oh, this is an idea. But it took you a long time to figure it out. And that's a slow hunch. And here's Steve Johnson talking about that.
The other problem that people have is they like to condense their stories of innovation down to kind of shorter time frames. So they want to tell the story of the eureka moment. They want to say, there I was standing there and I had it all suddenly clear in my head. But in fact, if you go back and look at the historical record, it turns out that a lot of important ideas have very long incubation periods. I call this the slow hunch. I've heard a lot recently about, you know, kind of hunch and instinct and kind of blink-like sudden moments of clarity. But in fact, a lot of great ideas linger on sometimes for decades. in the back of people's minds. They have a feeling that there's an interesting problem, but they don't quite have the tools yet to discover them. They spend all this time, kind of working on certain problems, but there's another thing lingering there that they're interested in, but they can't quite solve. Darwin is a great example of this. Darwin himself, in his autobiography, tells the story of coming up with the idea for natural selection as a classic eureka moment. He's in his study, it's October of 1838, and he's reading Malthus, actually, on population. And all of a sudden, the basic algorithm of natural selection kind of pops into his head, and he says, at last, I had a theory with which to work. That's in his autobiography. About a decade or two ago, a wonderful scholar named Howard Gruber went back and looked at Darwin's notebooks from this period. Darwin kept these copious notebooks where he wrote down every little idea he had, every little hunch. And what Gruber found was that Darwin had the full theory of natural selection for months and months and months before he had his alleged epiphany reading Malthus in October of 1838. There are passages where you can read it and you think like you're reading from a Darwin textbook from the period before he has this epiphany. And so what you realize is that Darwin, in a sense, had the idea, he had the concept, but was unable to fully thinking it yet. And that is actually how great ideas often happen. They fade into view over long periods of time. Now the challenge for all of us is, how do you create environments that allow these ideas to have this kind of long half-life, right? It's hard to go to your boss and say, I have an excellent idea for our organization. It will be useful in 2020. Could you just give me some time to do that? Now, a couple of companies like Google, they have innovation time off, 20% time, where in a sense, those are hunch cultivating mechanisms in an organization. That's a key thing. And the other thing is to allow those hunches to connect with other people's hunches. That's what often happens. You have half of an idea, somebody else has the other half, and if you're in the right environment, they turn into something larger than the sum of their parts. So in a sense, we often talk about the value of protecting intellectual property, building barricades, having secretive R&D labs, patenting everything that we have, so that those ideas will remain valuable and people will be incentivized to come up with more ideas, and the culture will be more innovative. But I think there's a case to be made that we should spend at least as much time, if not more, valuing the premise of connecting ideas and not just protecting them.
So the term is the slow hunch. That's the idea that I want you to remember. The slow hunch. A lot of ideas linger on for decades in the back of people's mind. For example, the first computer mouse was envisioned 65. Everybody thinks that Apple invented this in 1984. Actually, it was an old technique. So that has led people to think about some approximation like the 10-10 rule. Any technology that comes to the market that you think is new, it's probably 10 years old, or at least people have been thinking about it for a long time. 10 years to think about it. This is for exponential growth, this is where nothing's happening. And then it comes to the market. Okay, this brings me to the next term that I want to define. What do these following products have in common? LSD, Post-it notes, Viagra?
Accidental inventions.
Accidental inventions. It was the Viagra, yes. That gave it away.
Basically, I got a book as a Christmas present. It was accidental inventions.
And penicillin. And all of these are great stories. LSD, they were trying to find something out. Penicillin, there's a famous story about Alexander Fleming, who went on a holiday and came back, and some dish that he had some fungus in it, and that gave him the idea of penicillin. Teflon, they were trying to find something different. Now, via Viagra, they were actually trying to find out drugs for heart pains or chest pains. I don't remember. The side effect was, of course, people would have boner. But they realized, hey, we can use it for something else. Post-it note, they were actually trying to create a super glue. And it was really the worst glue that they came up with. And they just didn't use it. And then somebody else came and said, we can use it for something else. Serendipity, the accident of finding something useful or good without looking for it. Now, the terminology, serendipity, that's a really interesting term. It comes from the tale, a Persian tale of the princes of Serendip, which is Sri Lanka, way old fable. And it was these three princes who went out in the world, and they came across a lot of things, and everything happened by accident. So it became an inspiration into later literature and culture, where people where, for example, Sherlock Holmes and was inspiration for a lot of things. They actually, there's one story about a camel where they come to the road and said, there was a camel here. And they say, there was a camel, it was carrying a pregnant lady, and it's blind on the other eye, on the right eye, and it has a missing tooth. And then somebody accused them of stealing the camel, so they were taken to the emperor, and he asked, how can you come up with this story? Well, you know, we saw the grazing in the field. It was on the left side, but clearly the right side is you know, more green. And there was, you know, grass, chewed grass on the ground, explaining the missing tooth. And then they kept on and on and on with all these explanations. And of course, they were released. So the story was about these three guys that travel around the country and make all these accidental discoveries. The field of observation change favors only the prepared mind. And exponential growth. And that brings me to the last subject. Now, here we have different quadrants. Market invention, inventions that were invented by the market, by companies that are trying to make money. That's the network, and the individual is just individual trying to make money. I want to make this invention so I can sell it. And then non-market and individual and network. Now, guess where the most of the invention are?
4.
4. Where are the least?
3.
This is the market individual trying to get rich on some invention. Companies trying to get products out in the market, commercial products. Non-market individuals, a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, ideas. And the last one. So Steve Johnson, this is in the book, he took a lot of topics, a lot of invention ideas, and placed them, and then researched where should they fit. So that's sort of the lesson of the day, and we're sort of out of time. So liquid network, that's the key to innovation. This is how innovation happens. You bring people's ideas together where they have sex. Slow, the ideas that is, the slow hunch, the 10-10 rule, and serendipity. These are the lessons for today. And I will post the textbook, and I will post the questions for the lecture. Next, we will talk about the fusion of innovation.